to the teams that we are leveraging so that they can improve their products and services. However, there are a certain set of insights and features that are truly transformative. For example, in the skill space, or for example, in the AI space, we come across a lot of insights that really tell us how users think about use of a certain service or a product within the learning space. And all of those get prioritized on a product pipeline where we assemble a set of folks from across the company who can help us move that particular conversation to the product stage. We share these learnings. We have multiple report outs to stakeholder groups. We also have every 2 weeks a readout to our leadership team on how we went through the past 2 weeks in terms of experiments and what we found out. And we ask their help in prioritizing some of this. And the cool thing about these readouts is that it is well attended by our leadership team. Our corporate vice president sits in on all of these meetings and prioritizes that. So that tells you how important it is for us to bring these innovations and learnings up to the leadership team. And then they help us resource some of these to go, really try out at scale.
Now, Microsoft's had a real focus on growth mindset, and learning has been a real kind of engine, or the sort of the culture of learning has been a real engine for Microsoft's growth. Do the product teams, you've mentioned the Office team and the Azure team, is there a real hunger for the work that you guys are doing? Are people in Microsoft interested in how the process of learning can enhance their tools and offerings?
Yeah, definitely so. The proof of that is in the attendance for our readout meetings every 2 weeks. They are completely oversubscribed, and they are now at a point where we have to run them online for the most part. We very rarely have face-to-face locations where we do these readouts. The second aspect of that is that more and more product teams seek out research, and you get a lot of questions around, hey, is there some research? Is there some work that you guys have done? Have you guys run some experiments? Can we get some data around what you guys learned? How can you help us prioritize some features on products? It goes all the way up and down. We just finished a sprint with a product team where they were super interested in some of the results to a point where they embedded their whole bunch of engineers from their team into our sprint process. And we were able to not only sprint with that team in order to talk to users and learn from the users, but also in the end, the design of what we tried out was highly informed by the product team themselves.
So, Krishna, what are the kind of tools that you get to work with as you run these experiments? We mentioned AI, for example, and data. How do you think of the tool sets that you get to play with? And then one of the things is, I'm intrigued that that because learning is now starting to happen on digital platforms, whether it's productivity platforms or specific made for purpose learning platforms, I'm assuming you have a sort of a relatively new playground, so to speak, or very large data sets that you can run these experiments against. Am I right in thinking that?
Yes, partly. And here is why I caveat that. At Microsoft, we do sit on a tremendous amount of data. You know this quite well, Chris. And we are able to really look across the spectrum of multiple products and services. However, the one really key thing that dictates whether we are able to conduct an experiment or not is in how well we are able to justify the use of the data through an ethical and through a privacy lens. So the reviews that go on in order for us to be able to use any of the data that we have in our systems, even if it's not personal information, even if it's just pure telemetry of our applications or whatever, the level of review that goes into actually being able to get access to any of those data sets is far higher than any institutional review board review that I've ever gone through. So insofar as we are able to justify the use of certain data sets in a real way that does not infringe on the privacy and ethical use of data guidelines set forth by the company, we are able to get access to certain data sets which are not personally identifiable to the individual users. That's a huge thing that we have to consider. However, the data sets that you do get access to are quite large. For example, application telemetry is a huge thing. It's not anything the users are doing. It's just purely how the application is running. That is a large enough data set that you can actually build out quite complex models and workflows and try them out. So in terms of the tool sets, we at Microsoft right now use a lot of open source tools out there. The secret sauce lies in how we actually use them in a certain sequence or in certain workflows. We do a tremendous amount of literature work. Our teams are constantly learning and reading. And we also have a huge playbook of ideas and certain initial thoughts and processes that we keep tab of, and our team will go try out. One huge aspect of this that we have started to really do in a very serious way over the last year is this notion of micro experiments. We do not think that an experiment has to run like a month or 2 months or 5 months. We actually think that you can do some really meaningful work if you frame the problem appropriately and scope it, and you can actually run an experiment in 1 or 2 days. So we do that a lot. We have access to A/B testing platforms where we are constantly trying out new things, where we're constantly trying out new approaches to how we ship something, or how our product experiences are shaped. So the tools range from open source all the way to deep literature review, into academic research that we utilize. Many times we work with students who are interns to really help explore problem spaces that we would not traditionally be exploring. Of course, it's their IP, but we go out of our way to learn a lot from all of these avenues.
Mm-hmm. Got it. You mentioned earlier that you focus on what you call the higher order questions. And I'm interested in what you mean by a higher order question, and then at the same time, perhaps you could touch on why you think learning as an activity is such a good research subject.
Yeah. So in terms of higher order questions, the reason why we think that higher order questions are important is because it allows you to step back and see the forest for the trees. So when we are in research or when we are in innovation, there is a very high risk that people who lead some of these initiatives get into one problem very narrowly, to a point where their whole view of the field of view is constrained to just that one problem. But in the innovation studio that we run, we are not only interested in the individual problem, but we are interested in problem types. So we try to abstract these problems and group them together in something that is larger than what you might traditionally think of as problem solving within innovation spaces. For example, we do not think about how can I, structure this product so that this an assignment problem is easy to solve for the student. However, what we think about is, can we actually enable better sorts of assignments for people so that they can use more hands-on kinds of learning experiences to show what they are learning, or to actually learn. So the other big question is, we are constantly thinking about higher order problems, like how can learning technologies truly empower people to achieve more, and how can we really bring people into economic opportunity that they did not have before. So these are all higher order kinds of problems that we are constantly worrying with, and that frame the conversation for any of the smaller problems that we try to solve. And you will hear this repeatedly in many of the team meetings, in many of the ideation sessions. People will ask, how is this really empowering somebody to achieve more, right? So we have to set the framework for that. The reason why learning is a really good space for us to go do this in is because learning is everywhere. It starts not only from how somebody answers a customer support question online, but it goes all the way to how we might invent the next generation of AI tools. In the manufacturing sector, it is not just how a line worker is doing their job, but it is how profoundly they know the value of what they do and how it affects their product offering. So the learning is really intrinsic in everything, and in fact, that is one of the givens in any work environment, that if people are not learning, they are not very productive. And you see that more and more in the research that is coming out these days. And you've dedicated a lot of work in this podcast series and in other forums to talk about this. So learning is so fundamental to the way people function. It's so fundamental to humans that it is no longer a work thing, right? It is a human endeavor. It is how we advance the human way of living, if you might say that. This is why we think that technology can be a really good way of enabling learning and provide the tools for people to actually be more effective learners.
Got it. And I couldn't agree more. Let's talk, if we can, Krishna, about AI. This is a technology that's been um, in the cooker for a long time now, maybe 30, 40 years. But it seems to have had a real breakthrough recently in terms of ways for it to be meaningfully applied in all kinds of different use cases and scenarios. What sort of applications are you seeing of AI around this sort of higher order task of learning? Are you seeing interesting things?
Yeah, AI is starting to become really key in the way we think about learning as a broad sort of productivity space. Um, some of the areas of AI that are quite well known right now in terms of bots and question answer spaces, automated question answering, asynchronous support of learners, and a lot of work that has gone on at Georgia Tech and other places around this have been very well known for a while. But there is a whole new class of AI work that is coming out that is called BERT. And there is a lot of work that has been done in this space in the last year and a half. And if you go online and you search for BERT, BERT, you find a lot of work in this space. And that is truly in this advancing the nature of natural language understanding of humans, and how you translate that to machines. So the work that is happening in BERT right now is supposed to be so transformational that your ability to answer questions based on just casual search, your ability to frame very specific sort of directions to people based on what you see in text patterns, and a combination of multiple signals. Now you see images and speech being mixed into this, and the set of algorithms that are being sort of birthed under the area of BERT are supposed to be quite transformational for AI, and it's very exciting to watch all of this shape them something like a very traditional question answer bot that you might see in a course. So there is a tremendous amount of energy in this space, and a lot of it is being applied in the context of learning, because you help people learn and you make them more productive. So information discovery, information retrieval, information presentation, question answering at a very higher order than when what was traditionally possible. There is a tremendous amount of work that is happening there, and Microsoft itself is making a lot of investments in AI these days, particularly with the goal of encouraging expansion into things like text analytics that allow corporations and learners to actually use AI in the service of enhancing their productivity.
Got it. Interesting stuff. And I'll go do my research on BERT, NLP. One of the things that sort of hit the headlines a little bit around AI is this notion that any technology built by humans is at risk of encoding biases that humans have, and we know that we are bias engines. That's how we operate, and some of those biases can get amplified in all kinds of not so good ways. So I'm thinking about Amazon's forays into using AI to help select candidates for jobs. And I know at Microsoft we had a very big, very public challenge with a bot that we put out there called Tay, I think, that learned bad behavior from the people around it. And I'm really interested in this because, in particular, Brad Smith at Microsoft, I just read his book, which is called Tools and Weapons, where he's sort of becoming the conscience of the industry, and he's really working to try and make sure that there are guidelines and bumpers around how AI operates. Very, very interesting. An industry asking to be regulated is not a something you hear of very often. And it makes me wonder,